of the day.
It's a Thursday here on Power Business. It means we head into our Power Suit segment. This evening is no different. So we get in touch with the C-suite here in South Africa. We hear about their lives, their stories, and their journey. Tonight I'm joined by Reshni Singh, who's CEO at Business Process Enabling South Africa, and we unpack their life and also the work that she does there. Reshni, good evening. Thank you so much for your time.
Good evening to you and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for chatting to us, Reshni. Maybe before we get into the nitties about your work and even moving into business process enabling, where you're from, and also tell us about your childhood and your career.
Oh, thanks. So yes, I am a township girl. I was actually from a township in Durban called Phoenix. Obviously the product of a public school during the apartheid era, and had quite an interesting journey from a career perspective. I mean, initially I wasn't able to actually study full-time at university because my parents obviously couldn't afford it, so I actually studied through UNISA. I worked and paid for my studies on my own, and obviously it took me a lot longer than a normal degree would take because, you know, it's not easy having to keep a job as well as study. But yeah, I mean, I was quite fortunate in that I was able to get a job back then, unlike a lot of the youth today that, you know, don't actually have as many job opportunities. And I started off actually working in a medical practice as a receptionist. Eventually transitioned into an accounts department in a hospital. And then I think I was quite fortunate because I relocated to Johannesburg and got a job in government, which was the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And I was actually quite fortunate in that, you know, I had a rapid progression in my career at the DTIC. So I actually spent 21 years in government. And when I transitioned, I was actually a director in government and heading up the sector that I'm currently working in, which is the global business services sector. So yeah, it wasn't an easy journey though. It took a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of purpose-driven commitment from my side to be able to make an impact. And fortunately, you know, I had mentors at the DTIC that was able to see that potential, and I was able to grow within that department. And yeah, I mean, today I still can't believe, but I mean, I am actually the CEO of BPESA and loving what I do.
That's wonderful. I want to speak about your journey in the public sector and what that was like. Of course, we always hear, for instance, that the public sector is not the best place to work. Many professionals flee the space. Let's talk about your experience there and some of the lessons that you learned operating in that space.
Listen, for me, it was a fantastic opportunity because, you know, I could never see myself, you know, working in an environment that drove profit. It had to be about impact, and having a job in government gives you that opportunity to make a difference and create an impact. And I think I was also fortunate in that working in the sector that I did, which was focused on creating employment opportunities for youth in our country, that, you know, there was an excitement every day about going to work and making a difference. And I know that, you know, I've managed a group of people in government for a long period of time. And, you know, for me, it was, listen, if we are not going to do what we're supposed to do, there's companies that don't get paid. There's people that do not get jobs. So our action actually determines, you know, what the companies and the service delivery that the public actually experiences and businesses experience. So service delivery was of the utmost importance. And, you know, there's that principle that, you know, you as an individual, if you actually work towards being responsive towards business, responsive towards the needs of the community, then you're successful. And I do believe that if a sector that was hugely successful in terms of what we had to drive from a government perspective in terms of having the right policies in place, creating an enabling environment, attracting investment into South Africa, getting those jobs into South Africa. I know there's a lot of perception around government and the quality of service, etc. And I always say to people, it's never been like that. When you're actually in that role, behind that desk, having to deliver on your mandate and deliver on whatever your role is, and you just, the fact that you get done what you need to do, it will make a difference and you will see success. And I can honestly say that the work that the DTIC does is amazing. You can definitely feel the benefits of that work, especially in terms of the sector, again, the global business services sector, the number of investors we've managed to attract in the country, the number of jobs that we've managed to attract. I mean, we currently have about 100,000 jobs that services the offshore markets, predominantly the UK, the US, Australia. And it's fantastic because you're giving South Africans an opportunity to actually serve people that are sitting in those markets where they would have never had that opportunity to perhaps visit the UK or the US. But they're speaking to people, they're sharing experiences, they're talking about sports, they're talking about weather, they're talking about music. So it's such a fantastic opportunity for them. And I think I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that I had a role to play in that.
I want to speak actually when we speak about those global service business service sector there, and of course you are already speaking about what it does, but for somebody who might not be clear on what we're making reference to here, maybe take us back to the sector, exactly what it makes reference to, and then we can talk of course about the global footprint that we're making there, and of course the impact on unemployment.
Fantastic. So global business service is any IT-enabled service that can be outsourced and can be offshored. And typically, your contact centers would fall under global business services. And then you'd also have your more complex and highly complex roles like finance and accounting services, legal services, debt management services, healthcare. It's across the board. I mean, every single sector would have an IT-enabled service that would need to be delivered. And what we do is we try to attract those services to South Africa. And a good example would be, a global company like Amazon that creates thousands of jobs in South Africa that services their clients in the UK, the US, etc. So that is an example of the kind of businesses that we would attract and the volume of jobs that they come in with. It's obviously targeted at youth. So we look at matriculants where there's a program where we try to skill them in terms of work readiness and then transition them into employment. So the outcome is always that it must be employment. So you're not just training, you're training for an employment outcome, and that employment outcome sits in this offshore space. We also, a massive part of the work, BPESA actually stands for Business Process Enabling South Africa. So we are a national industry association that represents the sector, and we also represent South Africa in the global space, and we obviously share the South African value proposition in those source markets that I mentioned to be able to attract those businesses here. And I think South Africa does really well just because of the quality of service that they would get from our youth, the level of empathy that our youth would display. In most cases, it's also based on, with the UK, obviously there's a time zone affinity, so, you can service people during their business hours. With the US and with Australia, the model is slightly different because, but we do have 24/7 operations. where we could service them as well. It's more of like follow the sun kind of proposition. And I mean, we obviously have the technology, the innovation to be able to support that. And we are able to attract a lot of the global business process outsourcers whose core business and function is to provide these type of IT-enabled services to their client base. And I think one of the key highlights of my tenure as CEO at BPESA was that we were able to attract 21 new global BPO companies into South Africa in the last 2 years, which has been a phenomenal achievement. It's never happened before in 2 years. I mean, typically we would have had about 7 to 10, BPOs coming in every two years. This time around, it was 21. So it's been a hugely successful journey for us. And we create roughly about 20,000 jobs each year. And all of them servicing the offshore market.
Very interesting here, because of course you also mentioned that you looked after the sector within the DTIC. Let's talk about that also, about how the government enters the space to enhance this sector and the work that you do.
So the sector was obviously prioritized by government back in 2007 as a priority sector that could create employment opportunities for youth. And so it was part of the Industrial Policy Action Plan, and there was a policy that was designed to create that enabling environment. There was investment promotion initiatives that were undertaken, and there was incentives that were provided to attract businesses to South Africa. And in the later years, just prior to me leaving the DTIC, it was prioritized through the master plan. So there's actually a GDS sector master plan, and that master plan looks at creating 500,000 jobs in the sector by 2030. And there was a lot of, the master plan was a very simple plan, that had sort of 5 priority areas that looks at attracting investment. How do you go about attracting investment? And increasing the demand for services in South Africa. And then there was the supply side, which looked at skills development. How do we make sure that we have the right skills to be able to deliver those services, as well as infrastructure. So looking at, facilities, buildings, connectivity, and various other things under infrastructure to be able to support the demand as well. Also, I mean, historically, investors were always looking at specifically just Cape Town because it was known globally. And now we've been able to transition, and we've had fantastic growth in KZN, for example, as well as in Gauteng. And we are now focusing on tier 2 locations such as the Eastern Cape, as well as township models as well. And we've got operations, for example, in Jabulani, in Soweto. You're looking at an operation that's going to start in Alex, in Sandton quite soon, in Amlazi, in KZN. So trying to take the jobs to the people, and that's a priority of that master plan. Then we looked obviously at transformation. And how do we, create meaningful transformation in the sector, especially around leadership, where we develop and grow Black leaders, as opposed to always attracting, foreign skills to come in and be able to take on those roles. So a lot of effort in terms of meaningful transformation. And then the last area is obviously around sustainability. So ensuring that the work that we do and the ecosystems that we build are sustainable beyond that 2030 kind of vision. We don't want to just create jobs the one day and then lose all of them thereafter. We want them to be secure in South Africa, and secure not just jobs, but I think career progression for those that work in the sector as well. So it has to be decent, meaningful, employment with a very clear career progression. So that, in a nutshell, is what the master plan is all about, and that was co-created between government, industry, and our social partners, to be able to collaborate and deliver the outcomes of that master plan.
Very, very, I think, impactful sector indeed. Let's talk also about, the emergence of contact centers in South Africa, owned that are small, run by young people, run by women, run by people of color. I think you've mentioned, of course, skills there that I'm wondering also just from an SME and ownership perspective. Do we see those cases, the Reshni, and also the support that is provided by BPESA as well as government to ensure that we are, seeing these very impactful businesses also owned by people who were historically advantaged?
Yeah, so there's definitely a massive focus and priority around what we call emerging exporters, and looking at our SMEs as well. How do we get them actively involved and engaged and become beneficiaries of these offshore services? So we've got a very clear plan in terms of getting, firstly, the global companies that are in South Africa to actually, mentor some of these smaller companies and invest, in terms of their enterprise development, invest in these smaller businesses and give them opportunities to have exposure and be able to grow. As well as asking South African corporates that, listen, if in most cases lots of people need to meet their transformation priorities, they don't know what to do with their enterprise development spend or their skills development spend. And here's a sector where, you could meaningfully contribute and develop and support small businesses to be able to play in the global space, as well as being able to provide skills to predominantly excluded youth. So the other priority we have is that 30% of the youth that the sector employs must be excluded youth. And excluded youth means people that were raised with a social grant, to come from households where they earn less than 6,000 rand of income in that household per month, or they come from quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools. So if they meet any one of those criteria, they're seen as excluded youth. And how do we transition them and give them that opportunity of their first time job, and a career in this particular sector. So yes, that's part of what we do as well.
I want to speak then about you as you, of course, carry on trying to build the sector and pushing the impact that you say you've always wanted to push here, Reshni. What has been the most gratifying part of having this sector? I guess it found you, or you found it on your journey, and now really being able to pioneer and make sure that it does become a meaningful sector here in South Africa.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to wake up every morning and know that the work that I'm going to do for the day is actually going to create job opportunities for probably thousands of people that I may not necessarily have met. But I know that I have a responsibility in that everything that I do, whether it's, having an investor engagement and being able to encourage them to invest in South Africa, or whether it's, trying to negotiate for skills development funding to be able to train these people. So it's something that I think I'm actually quite honored to be part of. Not everybody gets an opportunity to be able to contribute, in a meaningful way to society and actually making some kind of difference. And it's something which, I'm also quite pleased that the team that I work with, we all seem to have that common purpose and common vision, and very aligned in terms of, what we want to change and the impact that we want to make. And it's very easy when you have, everybody rowing in the same direction towards the same targets with very clear goals, to be able to achieve them. And I think, like I said, I was at the DTIC when the master plan was developed. And having this opportunity to be able to actually implement it from the side of industry, I think is a huge honor for me. And it's something that I would actually want to see my way through, to that target that we have around 2030. A lot of people are very skeptical to say, it's not going to be possible. It's a stretch target, etc. But I truly believe that it's possible. We've got our work cut out for us. But you know what? It will happen. And I must say that, obviously, despite the tough economic conditions that we face, we still have a lot to be thankful for. And I think we obviously had a free and fair and peaceful election, which resulted in the formation of a government of national unity, which I think, although some may find that it's not perfect, but the most important thing for me personally and for my sector is that the sentiment expressed by international investors whom we engage with is hugely positive. And the fact that that is positive, I'm very convinced that it will result in a lot of, inbound capital flows, which will also result in the creation of additional employment opportunities, for our youth and ultimately economic growth. So, I'm very positive about that outlook and about the fact that, I know that there's many sectors in South Africa that make much greater contributions to the economy, but whatever little bit that we could do from a global business services perspective is making some kind of impact on the economy.
And before I let you go, if you had a magic wand to advance the sector, what would you do immediately, Reshni, to enhance its impact and also, I guess, to ensure that it does indeed meet those goals that are in that master plan?
Yeah, so that's a tough one because it's not a single, it's not a single thing. Like I said, everything is very, it's interlinked, So I would say I'm very excited because I think we're in a great, from a demand perspective, I think we're in a good position in terms of, investors actually looking at us and wanting to do more in South Africa. So that's something that I would want to, continue to pursue and ensure that, the demand actually comes in. And then I think, it's around the skills development, to be able to actually, start making an impact, I think, from your basic education phase, when people are already, in grade 11 and 12, when they're thinking about careers and they're thinking about opportunities, for them. It's to be able to create, awareness around this, and to be able to actually also invest in leadership, and to look at those that are already in the roles and how do we mentor them and coach them and get them to become, country heads of these operations, operations directors, MDs, CEOs. So, I always believe that when you rise, you have to make sure that others rise with you. And I think that is going to be my purpose, is to see how many people I could get within the sector and within the space to rise with me and, be able to lead these organizations. And it's not impossible because we've got dozens of stories within the sector where people started off as agents and they today MDs of global companies servicing global clients, which is a phenomenal story and opportunity.
Thoroughly enjoy actually hearing of such fantastic stories and also just a sector that is able to transform the lives of people like this. Thank you so much, Reshni, for letting us in to your sector, and I hope we'll keep speaking about it and all that it can do for our economy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for chatting to us. That's Reshni Singh, CEO at Business Process Enabling South Africa, and speaking there about the global business services sector. And that really is call centers, but on a global scale, based here in South Africa, servicing international clients. It's foreign money coming into the country. It's local jobs. It really is quite, I think, what I'd call a sexy model, one that, if well duplicated in the right places, could really see a great impact for our sector. Also, how we wrap up this edition of Power Business. Make sure you catch all these conversations up on podcast. We'll put them on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, as well as the Power FM website. I'm back with you tomorrow at 6 p.m. with the